Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Grid Talk Talks to Grid. Today, I'm joined with Charlie, Mila, and Amy, and today we're going to recap last week's race and we're going to talk about this week's race, which is in Spain as well. So let's jump back in time to last week's race where we were at Portimao. What did we think?
Oh,
Sorry, I fell asleep somewhere in between. I don't know.
Maybe about lap 37.
Earlier.
yeah, literally like lap two. It wasn't, I mean, I don't know what we were all expecting, but it wasn't great.
I feel like there were some overtakes. I think it was just because it was the classic like top three and all the action was sort of like P7 back. Or I say action was P7 back. It just wasn't exciting. It was strategy again, which for some races it's really interesting and cool to watch. But for races like this, it's like such a drag. I feel like the weather, if it was wet, that race would have been perfection. But yeah, it was just a bit boring. Like I think I tweeted a video of my mum like falling asleep watching the race, but it didn't have that excitement factor. I wasn't like on the edge of my seat. I wasn't there weren't like DNFs or there was one safety car because of Kimmy, and that was literally so early on in the race. It was kind of like you forgot about it.
I don't think though, like we're gonna get an exciting race all the time. On paper, I think I said it last week, this is gonna be a parade of a race because it's not a natural track to overtake. It was always going to be strategy. And even going, if we think about like Spain and Monaco, I think they're equally going to be as a snooze fest as this one we've just seen. So I kind of think this is just part and parcel of being an F1 fan, knowing that you can fall asleep and Lewis still wins.
I think I heard an interesting stat from Crofty at the beginning of the race where he was like, Portimao was the track with the most overtakes. I'm pretty sure he said that at the beginning of the race. So I was a bit like, interesting. Let's go. And then, I mean, there was like however many from Daniel in that race, and then bored. Like it was just a classic Verstappen, Hamilton, Bottas kind of race. It didn't give me, that sometimes you want. But again, I agree with you, Amy. Not every race is going to be edge of your seat. It's not going to be perfect every single time. Kind of like a football match. Like you can draw 0-0 or you can have like a 3-1 victory. It just depends on the track and the cars. But I feel like with this race, some of the cars were a lot closer together. I don't know about you girls, but I thought there was a bit more, the gap was closer, even if it was still like 3 or 2 seconds. I think they were a lot closer together, which is promising. And even with the new regulations next year, even though I don't think we're probably going to go back to Portimao, it does give you that kind of confidence that things are definitely going in the right direction.
See, although it was boring today, I would still like to race there next year because I think like the track itself it's just so funny to watch, like the up and down like roller coaster ride that track is. It's kind of funny, but it's also quite challenging. Like I don't know, I like you said, the gap's closing up. So next year, when the regulations change, like the race could be completely different. But was it more boring because the races that we've already had this year have been very exciting to say the least? So
I actually thought the Lewis, Max, and Bottas battle was probably one of the better ones we've seen as like a trio at the front. Like Max and Bottas were going at it, and then Max got close to Lewis, and then not close enough. I thought that part was actually pretty good on the top three front. I just don't think like fourth and fifth. I don't think we saw them like at any point of the race apart from the first lap. And I just think there was quite a lot of stuff at the back of the grid, which always doesn't really make a good race.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were a few interesting factors that came into play here, especially with like the ups and downs of the track. We had an issue with tailwinds the whole weekend. So the tailwind into turn 4 apparently was that bad. So people just had issues with track limits there all the time because they would either over or understeer, which is very interesting, I think. Also, the drain covers again, like what the heck? But I think the Red Bull was stronger here this year than I expected it to be from what we've seen last year. Max obviously had the chance to go for that pole position, but he just had an issue with track limits that kind of screwed him over at that point. So that I think is interesting to note, especially when you look into the race. DRS got enabled, so Max got closer to Bottas, but then he had an oversteer moment and Lewis had the chance to overtake him, which is of course absolutely stupid. But I think there are a lot of these kinds of issues on that track that make it very easy to bottle laps here and there. Also, we had the same problems with like Yuki Tsunoda just dislikes track limits, I guess, because always gets these off tracks. And I mean, no shade at all, you know, like it's his first year in this car and some of the tracks are quite difficult. It's cool, it's all right. I just think it's funny that every race since the first one we had like track limits and Yuki Tsunoda just not working together. And my personal favorite thing in this race actually was that little fight that Mick Schumacher had with Latifi, which shows that Mick actually gets something out of that car. I don't know how he does it, but he overtook a car on track for the first time in his very short F1 career. And honestly, I think that's interesting because we always feel like, oh, the Haas sucks anyways, you know, they cannot race any other car on track. Maybe they can. Maybe they just haven't had the right drivers for it this season so far. Maybe now we're getting to a point where that can be possible. Apart from that, I was actually pretty shocked with how bad Aston Martin was. I didn't expect them to be this bad. And Alpine on the other side, very surprising. Esteban Ocon this weekend, very strong.
I'm their lucky charm. That's why I had a chat with them midweek and then they're off. It was all me.
I actually think like the hero of today was Lance Stroll. How he did 40 laps on soft tires. Like, I'm sorry, but that's pretty incredible. Like, he has learned something from Checo. Like, honestly, I was blown away.
Yeah, he did really well today. Who was your personal driver of the day for last week's race? Because there's like something was going on that everyone was spamming for Nikita Mazepin to be driver of the day, and Checo was announced as driver of the day. But there are a couple of discrepancies if people do agree with that or don't agree with that on Twitter that I've seen. So in your personal humble opinions, who was your driver of the day for Portimao?
Can I be really biased? I would probably say Daniel, because like to go from P16 to P9 is pretty good. Like, and I had no doubt. Like, I had absolutely no doubt that he was going to absolutely storm the way through the field. But I mean, pretty good going. Like, he had a few knockbacks as well, where he went back down again, and like his pit stop wasn't great either. Whether that was McLaren's fault or his fault is a debate, but I'm gonna say both. I'm gonna say both.
Yeah, you and me both.
I think it's McLaren. This is like what we've 3 out of 3 races they've made a really awful pit stop. Like, sort it out. It's not just one off now, it's every race, and it's almost frustrating to watch. It's like, here we go, they've mucked up again. And then I think Daniel lost maybe 2 places because of that. Maybe he did contribute, but you know, they do these all the time. They must know that the drivers aren't going to stop exactly at the same point. I just think,
I mean, yeah, like I agree, like their pit stops are not great. And when I went to like the MTC, like we went to see where they practice and stuff, and they gave us all this information like about what they do, and they're like their practice pit stop time was like completely different to what they do on track, and I find that quite interesting, like, because why?
I just think they're 100% slower than Red Bull. You know, Max did a 2.3 and Daniel's was a 4.6. 100% slower. I get really annoyed. You don't want to.
Like today's was like Daniel didn't help. I don't think. Like it probably would have been shorter.
But also Lando's was slow today as well, because everyone on Twitter was like, "Oh my god, you're just saying that," and I'm just thinking, no, Lando's was. I don't want to say just as bad, but it was bad today, and I do think even last year. I mean, if you compare Red Bulls to McLaren,
but
even Ferrari.
Ferrari actually had bad pit stops today as well. That's what I mean. Like slow for McLaren isn't 3 seconds. Like that's fairly standard. So like, yes, they should pick up the pace, but like to compare them to Red Bull, I think is a bit unfair, because look, they're doing like sub 2 seconds.
Yeah, but why are they not doing that?
That's what they should be doing. Every team should be doing that.
I just can't remember the last time McLaren did a sub 3 second pit stop.
I agree. Every team should be doing that though. Not like, I feel like people pick on McLaren for their pit stops
because it's the most obvious. Listen, we're not bashing McLaren at all, because they did have a really good race today on both sides of the garage. It's just every week you literally just sit there going, just praying just for 1 week, just for them to go out. Yes, Daniel skidded and didn't stop in the right place, but the stop was slow. So I mean, you can blame both parties, and I will. But it needs to be, I think, top of their priority list to just in out going forward. But I don't work for McLaren, so hopefully they know that themselves. So
McLaren, if you're watching,
yes,
we've got some fans here. We're not slating you, but please. Sort out
criticism. Get faster. Get faster.
Yeah, literally, they're fast on track, and then off track it's like
sloth mode activated.
So I think I'm in agreement with Charlie that obviously Daniel would have been my driver of the day. I think, Amy, do you agree, or are you going with?
I'm going to go with Mick as my driver of the day, because he lapped his own teammate. Fundamentally, that's the same car, and he's lapped him. Yeah. That's pure embarrassment from Mazepin. Like, you shouldn't be doing that. Maybe 30 seconds, like we've seen that with Max and Albon, last year. But an entire lap, like, good on Mick, though. We love Mick.
Yeah, he's definitely getting something out of that car, and I was very impressed with his performance today. Also, side note, can I have his engineer as a hype man, or just as like a shoulder to cry on? I want to find this man. I need a hug from him. I need a motivational speech. I feel like he is someone I need in my life. Their team radios are just so wholesome. It's like, oh. Anyway, Mila, who's your driver of the day?
I mean, my heart beats very strongly for Mick, of course. But I gotta say, I cannot get rid of the thought that Esteban Ocon was really good as well. On my Discord, some people were like talking about this, and they were like, Ocon is so good, but also Stroll and Danny Rick, and wow. And I feel like there were quite a few drivers who had a massive improvement, not only from today onwards, but from the race onwards, but from last year compared to this year. So I think I would have to say Ocon, maybe. I don't know. I'm really torn, actually, because I feel like there were some very good individual performances today.
Agreed. I think this race definitely highlighted the driver as much as the car. I think with some tracks you really do see how a driver gets the most out of a car, which is always great and exciting to see. So that was last week's race. Now on to this week's. Happy that it's 2 consecutive races in a row, but at what cost? Because we are going to Barcelona this week. I have a personal attachment, as does Charlie, to Barcelona, because we both went to winter testing but didn't actually see each other. Bizarre. You went, did you go the first week?
No, it was the second week.
That's why.
That's
why.
I
went the first week. I went to the first week of testing, and it was the first time that I saw more than a practice session. So, and it was so amazing. I went into the Racing Point at the time's garage and made really awkward eye contact with Lance Stroll. It was tense. And yeah, in terms of like walking around the track, it's beautiful. And then you see the cars on track racing, and you're like, I don't know if you girls feel the same, but Barcelona isn't one of my favorite tracks to watch. I feel like I will always just get bored after the first maybe top 5-ish laps. I'm like, okay, that's done. Whoever started pole is gonna finish first. So what do we think about Barcelona this week? Do we share my same boring feelings? I think that sums it up, to be honest. I think because we see it for pre-season testing years before, the drivers know it like the back of their hand. There's hardly any room for error. The only thing that can really trip drivers out probably might be the weather, but then again, I think the weather's going to be fine. Especially for the more experienced drivers, I think they're just going to go bish bash bosh. Although I do think sometimes for the drivers that are in new teams, so for Carlos, Daniel, Fernando, and I'm trying to think who else swapped teams.
Of course, all the
Checo. Yeah, for Checo. So for experienced drivers that are now in different cars that usually would have been there for testing, they can't treat this like testing. They've got to go straight into it, which I think is going to be quite interesting to see. But then for the rookies, this is also going to be very interesting to see, because this is such a usual like track that they go to every single year, that they know like the back of their hands. So I'm excited to see how they do. But let's quickly talk about how the track has changed. So they've actually implemented a change on track. I didn't know if anyone wants to quickly talk about that and their feelings, or explain for our lovely viewers what's going on.
It is at turn 10, which everybody, when they announced it, everybody said how it was the wrong turn to change. It didn't really need to change. Like, being there and seeing the cars go around, like, there's nothing wrong with it. They've basically just made it a little bit more like of a swooping corner, rather than, it was quite tight, but I don't see anything wrong with that. Like, when I was there, I saw, even though it was only testing, I saw Lando overtake Seb quite well on that corner. So I don't really know why they've changed it, apart from there is more of a runoff area now, so obviously that improves the safety for the cars and the drivers, blah blah blah. But the turn that they should have changed was the chicane, because I mean, so I'm gonna refer to me playing it on F1 2020, but I hate it. Like, when I never make the chicane, like, I just kind of go straight over it, and it's awful. Like, Amy plays with me, so she knows how bad I am at that part of it. I know that Mina knows that Franz has had a go at the new layout. So how did he find that?
Well, he actually was surprised that you could actually go pretty well with like the new layout. Of course, what you have to keep in mind is that in F1 2020, the lap times are not realistic, at least not really. Some people there drive like 1:13 lap times, which is out of this world if you ask me. More realistic would be like 1:18 maybe. So it's interesting, and he actually was quite surprised of how well it works. But I personally, I think, sure, this is like not the most exciting track ever, But what I consider interesting is that I thought this is a Mercedes kind of track. They were pretty strong there last year with going in, like, I think they had the front row, and then Max started in third, and then Max and Valtteri switched places during the race. But today, when I listened to some podcast that is also pretty good, they were talking about how they think maybe this year Red Bull could be stronger on that track. And I was like, I don't know about that. But it was an interesting thought. And I'm kind of like looking forward to seeing whether or not that could be something that happens this year. But judging from last year, I would say it's a very Merc-dominated track. So yeah, really no idea how it's going to go. I think the track changes weren't necessary, but they also haven't really made it worse. So really, honestly, I don't really have any kind of opinion on it. If like,
I mean, I guess like a plus would be is that we have it there and Alonso's here as well now. So like, yay.
With no
But-
fans?
I'm not sure if there are or not.
I thought it's cancelled, isn't it? No fans.
I'm not sure because I actually had tickets, but I had booked the Carlos Sainz McLaren grandstand for last year.
Ouch.
Yeah, so then like they couldn't roll on the tickets to this year because he's no longer at McLaren. So I chose not to go after that because I wanted a free hat and stuff. So I wasn't gonna go sit in a grandstand full of Ferrari fans. So yeah.
No, the Tifosi are a party. They're a vibe. Okay, predictions for this weekend. Do we think it is going to be a Mercedes 1-2, or do we think that there could be a little bit of a surprise in there?
Oh, I think it's Merc 1-2, and I'm going to be annoyed. Because if anyone knows, I've been manifesting Max all season. I will continue, but do I think they'll win in Spain? Yes, I do.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a Merc 1-2 and then Max.
yeah, I mean, I probably agree from like what we've seen last year. I still want to hope that Max at least gets a P2. I honestly, what I have to say though, I've always been going for, Pierre Gasly is going to come up somewhere magically ever since the season started. I don't think like that anymore. I kind of lost my trust in AlphaTauri, so I won't predict Pierre Gasly in the top 5 this week, okay? And that's bold from my side.
Both McLarens in the top 6 this weekend.
I mean, they didn't do too badly last year. I think they qualified P7, P8, and they finished P6, P10. So, I mean, it's
Both in the top
possible.
6.
It's possible.
Both. Bold prediction. I have faith in my man and Lando. I was going to say my men, but I didn't want to say that.
I mean, I'm definitely hoping for not another Q1 knockout for Daniel.
Stop. Let's end it there before. I can't believe you've even mentioned that. Okay, fabulous. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. We hope you enjoyed it, and make sure you are subscribed, which is down below, the big red button. Click subscribe and click the notification bell so you can know every time we post it, one of these. Make sure you're following all of our social media on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and TikTok, and make sure you're following us all individually as well. We tweet a lot of good stuff, and we will see you next week. Thank you, ladies.